So that covers what the exam entails, and we're going to go into the recommended reading materials. The books and prep materials, the first one I will recommend is the Maintenance and Reliability Best Practice by Ramesh Gulati. So far, it is the best, and as of last year, Ramesh released the third edition, and the third edition will be the only book that I will recommend for anyone that is trying to pursue CMRP. Now, there are other books that you can also have, which helps you not only to pass the exam, but even beyond the exam. That is the Reliability-Centered Maintenance book. The RCM2 by John Mowbray has a lot of the details when it comes to implementation of RCM. So if you really want to dive into RCM, then this book is what you would look for. They have released RCM3, but I haven't looked much into that book yet.
So Daniel, I have a question. What about third edition and second edition? Is there a big difference, or second edition is still valid?
Okay, so the third edition has more added to it with the update from Industry 4.0. It's got ISO 55000 series information added. And so the best you should get is the third edition. Now, when you go on Amazon store or you go on online, eBay and stuff to try and get this book, the older versions are cheaper. So don't be attracted to buy the cheaper versions. It is the third edition that you need. If you want to just have the one book that is going to help you through this, then it is the third edition, please. Now, if you're into maintenance and if you're into maintenance planning and scheduling, then the book by Doug Palmer is the one to look for. It has a lot of information when it comes to planning and scheduling of maintenance activities. Now, when I took my exam like a few years ago, there were very limited prep materials in the system. So that compelled me to try and help other students. And by so doing, I created the practice quiz and I created the study aid on my website, which we'll dive into a little bit more. So here I have the interface on my website. If you haven't already signed on my website, I have the CMRP tutorial, which is the video presentation of all the 5 pillars. It's a high level 2.5 hours way of getting to wrap your head around what the 5 pillars entail. In addition, I have a separate course named CMRP Practice Test. In this test, you have several maintenance and reliability questions that kind of test your knowledge on the basic principles. And it's a good thing to have to practice before you go and attempt to challenge the official exam. This gives you an idea of which of the pillars you are strong in and which ones you have weak knowledge in, and then you are able to polish on your weak areas. I have the same course on Udemy. If you're not familiar with Udemy is a platform for personal development, and people go there to get a lot of like self-development videos and presentations to be able to grow in your career. So the same course is available on Udemy. If you're interested in the Udemy version of this course, just send me a note and I will be able to give you the code to access them if you are interested in the Udemy one. However, when you register for this webinar, you would have had access to the 3D MDS website. You would have the two codes that allows you to sign up for both the CMRP practice test and the study aid. Okay, he's not responding. So with this practice test, I have 12 of them. It's about 420 questions in total. And I keep reviewing and updating them based on the feedback that I get from the students that take my course. Out of this 420 questions, I have presented 2 mock exams. And this mock exam is made in the format just similar to the actual CMRP exam, in that it is timed and you are allowed to answer these 110 questions within 2.5 minutes, 2.5 hours, okay? So this gives you a feel for the real exam, the pressure and everything. You can set yourself up and put yourself under pressure and try and go through the mock. Now, the way it works is that if you are able to get 80% or more in the final mock exam, then the probability of you succeeding the first attempt is high. That is the statistics I have gotten. But 80% is not the passing mark for CMRP, okay? Just so we are all on the same page. I would go through a few frequently asked questions when it comes to CMRP certification in a few slides later. On here, we have a LinkedIn group that we chat and we ask questions relating to CMRP certification. You may choose to join the group. It is called CMRP Study Group on LinkedIn. So you may choose to join us if you like, if you haven't already done so. There is also the SMRP Exchange. Let me get my pen. SMRP has something they call Exchange. And Exchange is kind of like a forum where all the registered people are able to chat and ask questions relating to anything to do with maintenance and reliability. So you may find people asking questions about unique things applicable to their industry or their specific job site. Maybe somebody's looking for like a CMMS program for a small company. Somebody may type in what is the best resource for CMRP exam. And so once you register with SMRP, you can join the exchange group and you can pose your questions and you can ask as many relevant questions as you like. So these are other ways to communicate and get engaged in your preparation. Any questions so far? If you have no questions, please type no.
Daniel, I have a question. How long will have access to this mock and other question and answers? So is it 3-day period or we can have unlimited or like?
Okay. So for the website, let me position myself well. So when you go on the website, the 3D MDS academy.com, this website, you would have access forever.
Okay.
As long as it exists. Okay. Now, the access to the presentation for this webinar, and then subsequently the recordings of this webinar is going to end 3 days after the webinar is completed. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any more questions? Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, which is the frequently asked questions. So I've been doing this for a few years now, and so based on some of the feedback I get from my students, I've put together those frequently asked questions so it can help you understand a little bit more, okay? So some folks ask me, how long does it take to prepare for the CMRP exam? So the answer to this is it depends. So for individuals who are in active maintenance or active reliability roles, and you're talking root cause analysis, waybill analysis, and you are actively engaged in the terminologies in the industry, there's likelihood that you would use a shorter duration than somebody who is, like for me, when I was working with maintenance, my daily talks was more to do with technicians, HET training, HET absenteeism issues, dealing with assigning works and stuff. And so if I was to do that during that time, it would have taken me a longer time to prep. So for people who are actively engaged in maintenance and reliability roles, some folks are able to do it in 6 months. But if you have been out of school for a long time and you need to brush up on certain things, it may take you longer. Okay. Now, what is the pass mark for CMRP exam? So this is not known. This pass mark, there is no publicly available pass mark. SMRP does not share that information. But what I know is that it is a percentile. And a percentile means that whatever the percentile pass mark is, you must equalize or get above that percentile. So assuming that there is speculation in some of the chats that I've had online that it is 64 percentile. So if this is true, that means that when you attempt the exam, it's going to be based on the group of people who attempt the exam. So you may still get 60%, and if this 60% is above 64, if your mark is above the 64th percentile, you will pass. And you can still get 80%, and if it is below the 64th percentile, you will fail. So the percentile is just basically the group of people that go to attempt the exam. Okay, I hope that is clear. The next one being, are the practice questions the same as the CMRP official exam? I would say it is similar. I have had students who say that they've seen about 30% of my practice questions in the exam. SMRP does not provide past questions to the public. And so that information is not available. The best you can get is maintenance and reliability professionals putting together study materials, webinars, seminars, in order to prepare you for the exam. All right. So all I have is testimonies from previous students. And if you go to Udemy or you go to my website, you would find the testimonies from other students who have successfully passed the exam. In some cases, some students have indicated that my practice questions are a little bit harder in terms of the technical details, okay, compared to the actual exam. So, for instance, the most recent I've heard was they never saw any questions relating to lubrication in terms of understanding the nitty-gritties of lubrication, right? But you would have similar questions in my practice test. So I would rather have you go through the hard time of learning so that the actual exams becomes easier than to make the practice questions easy and then you go to the real exam and it becomes harder. All right. So that's my approach to that. What is your success rate? I don't have a success rate because I'm not organizing the exam. I don't have an exam center to say that I had 10 people who took the exam and 9 people passed. My way of handling or teaching or facilitating this course allows people to try and schedule the exam on their own time when you're ready. And I give you all the tools that you need to get ready, and then you decide when to challenge the exam. Okay. How long does it take to get the exam results is the next question. For the online test, it is almost instantaneous. It may take a minute or two to process the exam results, but it is instantaneous. If you are in a location where you have to use the paper method, then it might take longer. Some I've seen folks that it took them almost 2 months to get their paper results. So depending on your location, the exam centers around you, you may be able to take the paper one or take the online one. It depends on you. But for us, I think Edmonton and Calgary were the main centers for us for the online, if you are in Alberta, so to say. So that is all for the frequently asked questions. Does anybody have anything to ask or add to this?
Daniel, the question I have seen in some other places, like, are there really lengthy questions like a paragraph, or is it just like 2 lines and straightforward question and answer, or it's a big story like half page?
No, so you have 110 questions. So imagine you have 110 questions and you have just barely 1 minute for each question, right? So you won't be spending 5 minutes reading just the question, okay? So the question types are in such a way that you should be able to tackle them within a minute. So if you're reading paragraphs, like half a page of question, it's not a probable question that can appear in the main exam. The other thing I want to mention is, since CMRP does not require people to have experience, it doesn't have educational limitation, it is not geared towards any particular discipline. So the question types are not too technical to any particular discipline, and it is not too analytical in the sense that you would not have to calculate. I can remember the calculations that I did during my time will be between 5 to 10 questions maximum. Okay, so it's just basic calculations, and you just have to use the basic on-screen calculator to get your results. So if you are looking for practice questions and you find the ones that are asking for more than basic analytics, then you might be into something different. All right. Okay. Moving on. So In today's webinar, our objective is to go through the body of knowledge required by SMRP for CMRP certification. We'll talk about that. It is divided into 5 pillars. Pillar 1 talks about business and management. In this pillar, you will look at how to translate the organizational mission, vision, and values into M&R goals. Pillar 2 talks about manufacturing process reliability. Pillar 3 talks about equipment reliability. This one comes in 2 folds. One is the processes used to assess the current performance state of the equipment, and the second is how to improve the processes involved, the techniques involved in improving the current reliability and maintenance state of the equipment. Pillar 4 talks about the organization and leadership, and then we will dive into work management on our last day, which goes into planning, scheduling, and maintenance execution, in addition to inventory management. All right. Moving on to the next one. Before we get into the meat and potato of this webinar, I'd like to ask, we have to get some of these terminologies straightened up before we dive into the details of the webinar, because some of these terms will be used over and over again. So the question I'd like to ask is, what is an asset? Open question for discussion. Any takers?
I'd say anything you have or own that holds a value.
Absolutely. Yes, anything that has value or has potential value is an asset. So somebody may have an antique car, a gold coin, and may call it an asset. And it may be tangible or intangible. Somebody may have a software and call it an asset. Somebody may have a Bitcoin, a financial asset, and they are all different types of assets that have value. Okay. Now, our focus is on physical assets. Physical assets, we are talking plant equipment, pumps, motors, engines, compressors, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now let's talk about best practices. So best practice is a technique, a method that is used to achieve a desired result in the most efficient way. So it gives you superior results compared to others. Best practice is relative. So for instance, a company may have a best practice of using condition monitoring as one of their maintenance strategies. However, that same best practice is just a standard practice for another organization. So best practice is relative. It gives superior results, and it could be the best time to actually perform a PM. One organization may say, okay, for this type of compressor, it takes us 3 hours to perform an oil change. And for another organization, it may take them 6 hours. So best practice is looking at what the organization that takes 3 hours to do, and looking at the difference between what you do and what they do, and learn from the best practice so that you can improve what you have. Somebody just typed in. Okay, Damien said he was switching computers, so devices. Okay, so that is the basic understanding of best practice. And it's always changing. The best practice of today might be standard practice tomorrow, and it's evolving, right? How about top quartile? So when we say top quartile, I'm just gonna try and illustrate that here. So when you have something like this is my first quartile, second, third quartile, fourth. Okay, so you take a particular industry and you will look at the number of companies in that industry. It could be oil and gas, downstream, upstream, pulp and paper industry, or manufacturing, refineries and stuff. You would compare whatever KPI you're looking at. It could be, let's say, revenue or cost of production or any criteria or metric that you're using to gauge, and you put them all on a scale. And the bottom performers will fall under the first quartile. Okay. So the top quartile is the ones that fall in this category. So let's say company A, company B, company C, company D. So when it comes to, let's say, cost of producing a barrel of oil, let's say a barrel of oil. So this company is doing it at, let's say, $30 per barrel. This may be doing it at 25, and this may be doing it at $20 per barrel, and the top guys will be doing it at $19. This is just hypothetical numbers, okay? So this is what differentiates the companies, right? The cost of producing barrel. But you can use this in availability, reliability KPIs as well. So when I talk about top quartile, I mean those guys on the top here, and they form the best in class. Okay, and not all organizations remain in the top quartile for all the years. They may move, they may drop down, and some from the bottom may move up and down and stuff like that. So that kind of gives us a brief understanding of some of the terminologies that we'll be using throughout the course. Any questions? All right. All right, so let's carry on. So in this pillar number 1, we are going to look into the skills that is used to translate organizational business goals into an appropriate maintenance and reliability goals to support and contribute to the business results. Okay, so in this one, you have a corporate office that has the mission, vision, and objective of the organization. So our function as M&R professionals is to create a strategic direction and plan for maintenance and reliability operations. So with the vision and mission already established, the business will have different business units to try strategically to achieve the organizational goals. So you may have a marketing strategy for the organization. You would have a department for research and development, and you would have the asset management and strategy, and you will have the IT, HR, and different other departments depending on the size of the organization. Okay, so our function as M&R professionals is to make sure that the M&R strategy that we will develop aligns with the business objective. Okay, so the primary goal of pillar number 1 is to ensure that the M&R professionals align M&R goals with the overall business goals. Okay. Now we'll look into how mission vision statements are created and how the values add to the organizational framework in order to achieve their objectives. So a mission statement defines the company's business, its objectives, and approach to those objectives. When you talk about a vision statement describes the desired future position of the company. It is inspirational and it's a statement that is an idealistic future of the organization. So it is ideal because the vision is assuming a lot of things that makes it achieve these goals without any constraints, right? In order for the organizations to achieve the mission and vision goals, they use values as guiding principles. And I have listed quite a few of the most popular values that organizations put out there. Honesty, integrity, professionalism, family, friendship, hard work. Others talk about diversity and inclusiveness. In your organization, do you feel engaged? Does the organization empower the people to be able to be themselves? Because people come from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different sexual orientations, marital statuses, and so when you bring all these people from different nationalities together, the differences needs to be harnessed into producing an effective work environment that fosters continuous improvement, that fosters activities that help to achieve the organizational business goals. So I would like to ask the team here, which of these values resonates with your organization? It's an open question for discussion.
We use the respect and integrity out of this group as part of our core values.
Oh, okay. Respect and integrity.
I'd say in the company that I presently work for, professionalism, diversity, inclusiveness, and also integrity are some of the things that we stand on.
That's great. And this represents organizations that have like international representation. So they acknowledge that diversity and inclusiveness is a key part of the value system they have. Awesome. Thanks for your contribution. We will move on to some examples of the corporate goals. So here we have examples of the corporation, the mission, vision, and values. So let's take a look at SMRP. So SMRP's mission is to develop and promote excellence in maintenance, reliability, and physical asset management, okay? And the vision is to be the global leader for maintenance, reliability, and physical asset management profession. And then the values, SMRP values data-driven excellence, sharing, collaboration, membership focus, continuous improvement, accountability, trust and respect, integrity, and social responsibility. Let's look at Microsoft. Our mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. That's a pretty big ambition to have. Let's look at the vision. To help people and businesses throughout the world to realize their full potential. So that's where the idealistic nature of vision comes into play. Like, how do you measure this? How do you measure that you are actually helping everybody and every organization, business unit realize their full potential? So that's why vision statement is more futuristic, it is idealistic, it's assuming without constraints, right? And let's look at their values: innovation, diversity and inclusion, corporate social responsibility, trustworthy computing, AI technology. Let's look at the ExxonMobil information here. The mission, I like this one, it's short, simple, and you can remember it. Fueling the world safely and responsibly. The mission statement should be short enough for employees to be able to recollect or to remember and be able to say. I was reading an article, one organization, the CEO went out to the shop floor and he asked some of the folks about the company's mission and vision, and none of them, I mean, he talked about 2 or 3 guys, and they could not actually articulate the mission and vision statement. So he went back to his organization and said they have to make a change to their mission and vision statement because it does not resonate with the folks that are actually doing the work. Anyway, so ExxonMobil says that their corporation is committed to being the world's premier petroleum and chemical manufacturing company. They look for values like work flexibility, safety and security, recognizing human rights, integrity, diversity, and inclusion. So here are some of the examples that you see in the industry, and there are a lot more out there if you are trying to, I'm sure almost every one of us have an organization that have a good mission and vision statement. So, but having to know what they stand for is basic fundamental information that you require to pass your CMRP exam. Now let's look at goals. All right, so let's recap what we learned yesterday. Yesterday we looked at pillar number 1, which involves M&R professionals translating the business objectives into maintenance and reliability strategy, and making sure that all the strategies that we develop for equipment aligns with the vision and mission and values of the organization. So let's have an open conversation on what we learned yesterday. So what do you remember? And also we talked about the pillar number 2, which is manufacturing process reliability. So what were some of the highlights that stuck to you yesterday?
So I really like the formulas, the clarification, how to remember and how to use those. Like I have used those things in the past, but it was a good fresh up, and so it will be beneficial now.
Okay, awesome. Awesome, that's good. How about
Sure. So cross model that was shared, I've never seen or heard of that before. I see its application now in our industry. So that was new to me and something that I look forward to implement. From a manufacturing standpoint, I definitely agree with what was shared in that from a design standpoint, it's the most economic or feasible way of effecting change for the company. We'll see more benefits there as opposed to sending a component out that has a known failure mode and then reconciling through warranty. So I definitely agree with what was shared on that stand for those 2 standpoints.
Awesome, that's good to hear. What were some of the highlights from yesterday for you?
I'll agree with Damien on that as well. But just to be honest, one thing that really stuck out to me was just the the difference between the mission and the vision statements.
Yeah.
That's, to me, that was always like a muddy term that they kind of went together, but now I completely see the difference between the two.
Awesome. That's good to know. He has just written a note and he indicates that risk assessment and risk methodology from the steps was from the most effective to the least effective is what were some of the highlights for him. Leading and lagging indicators as well. Awesome. Yeah, so when it comes to the failure mode and effect analysis, this technique is usually used in evaluating the different failures of a component and how it affects the system in general. So once you're able to identify the different failure modes, you are able to find the potential effects on the system, and you will determine how to control it based on the risk priority number. Like you will rank them according to a scale. And we will dive into a little bit of the scaling today. So first of all, to do FMEA, you will define the function. And this method has been used in industry. It is almost now the standard for world-class performing organization. So if you look at the maintenance strategies for most world-class organizations, you would use the failure mode effect and analysis to develop the maintenance strategy. And based on that maintenance strategy, you can have your highest critical components taken care of first before you look at the less critical components. At a high level, you define what the function is. So for instance, if you have a pump, the pump's function may be to provide flow. But the pump itself is designed to give a certain capacity. So that capacity may be maybe 100 gallons per minute, right? So you define the function. Now, once you define the function, the next level will be what is the potential failure modes that can occur on this pump. So you will take the different components, maybe the casing, the impeller, the wire ring, and all these different components and determine the failure mode. Once you do that, you would assign every potential failure mode with 3 factors. The first one being the severity of that failure mode. So if the impeller was to get jammed, what was the impact? If the wire ring was to be worn totally, what was the impact? So you would do all that into the different components, and then you would assign them we have severity, occurrence, and detection. That's the main criteria you would use for the FMEA. And each one of this has a scale of 1 to 10, okay? 1 being the least severe effect on that component, and 10 being the highest impact, or how bad the impact will be on the component itself, or on safety, or on production, right? Occurrence, how often does this occur? You would have a criteria and rank them from 1 to 10 as well, and the same with detection, from 1 to 10. So once you're able to establish this, you would compute the risk priority number, RPN. And RPN is the multiplication of each of these rankings. So if each one was 10 as the maximum, and you multiply them, the highest you would get is 1,000 for risk priority number. However, you don't always rank every component at 10. So in reality, you have a range of risk priority numbers, and then you would rank them based on the highest, from the highest to the lowest. Okay. And here is how you would go about it. So the risk priority number becomes your criteria for ranking. So if, for instance, you would have a pump, and let's say the impeller, the failure mode has a RPN of, let's say, 800. And let's say the shaft has a RPN number of, if you multiply that, is 500. And let's say there is a seal, mechanical seal, and you have your RPN being, let's say, 655. Okay, this is just hypothetical numbers. Now, because of the criticality, you will want to tackle the highest RPN first. So that means that in your maintenance strategy, you would want to put measures in place to make sure that the impeller is protected from that failure mode, right? So you will rank impeller failure as the highest, followed by, this is 655, so followed by the seal before the shaft. Is that clear with the risk priority number? Any questions around the FMEA stuff? We are going to go into some example now. All right, let's carry on. So reliability block diagram is a graphical representation of components and subsystems in the way they are connected reliability-wise, not necessarily how they assemble them together. So we use this in order to simplify very complex systems into basic block diagrams, so it allows us to be able to analyze them reliability-wise. Okay, so I put an example here, which is, assume it's an automobile, let's say a pickup truck or whatever you may be interested in, a haul truck or whatever. But if you take the main system being at the top and you break it down, you can divide the subsystem into engine, system, chassis, undercarriage, and transmission. This might not be exhaustive, but this is just to give you the idea of how to break down a system into subcomponents and then into components. So if you take the engine, for instance, the engine has the fuel system, and it has the ECM that controls the overall performance of the engine. You can go into harnesses, you can go into so many different facets of every subsystem. But to make it simple, you can keep it at a very high level so that it becomes manageable, okay? So the same way you go into chassis, you can have the main frame and the body, which you can break down into further other components as well. So with a reliability block diagram, you can assign different reliability numbers to the different subsystems. So for instance, this could be 0.9 based on a calculation, or it could be a database that you would use, or it could be something that you have calculated by yourself, okay? So you would have all the reliability numbers assigned to each one of them. And based on that, you can estimate the reliability of the whole system. So that means that the lower the number of components, the much better the, or the much easier for you to analyze the system, right? But the more broader it is, the much more difficult it is to actually assign reliability numbers. So let's go into the different categories of reliability block diagrams. So when you develop the block diagram, it can be in series or in parallel. So components are naturally in series, just like a chain. So when you arrange components in series, every component has to perform in order for the end results to be successful. So in this case, if you take a chain, every member of the chain has to be okay. If you have a sling in between or you have a shackle in between, the shackle has to also perform in order for the chain to hold the load. And this is a simplified way of looking at it. Component 1, 2, and 3 has to all perform successfully in order for the system to be successful. So, for instance, you take a pump. The casing has to be in good shape. The impeller has to be in good shape, be reasonably in good shape. The seals and the wiring and everything else has to work together. You have to have power supply to the motor. You have to have all these things working together to have a successful system. Now, when you have one component go bad, just like the chain cannot hold anymore. So the weakest link will be the driver of the reliability of the whole system when it comes to series arrangement. So all components must work successfully for the system to work. So with this in mind, now let's take a look at a computer. So a desktop computer consists of power supply units with reliability of 99%. The computer processing unit has a reliability of 99% as well. The monitor has a reliability of 0.95, and the keyboard and mouse combination have a reliability of 90%. Now, we take note of this. All components must function properly for the computer to be successful. So when you see the statement, it means that it is arranged in series. What is the reliability of the computer? The way you go about it is you break down that system into various components and you arrange them whether in series, because every component has to work. So that means that the power unit has to be able to provide the power, CPU must process the information, the monitor must display the information, the keyboard and mouse must function for the computer to be useful. So then you have a successful system. Now for the reliability of this whole computer, it will be the product of all the reliabilities of the individual systems. Okay, and based on the formula that we just learned, what is the reliability of the computer system?
84%.
Do the calculation and let me know.
84% or 0.84.
Awesome. Okay, I guess you guys are right on there. So awesome. So that's great. So let's go to the next slide, which talks about the effect of having so many components in series. So for instance, when you take a component and you have a reliability of 95%, and then you add another component to it in series, the reliability of the whole system drops to 90% just because you added another component to it. Now, when you add another component with the same level of reliability, the system reliability drops to 85%. So the reason for this table is that as you increase the number of components, the reliability drops down to the barest minimum. So if you are a designer, you want to use as minimum components as possible, number of components as possible. So just remember that as the system reliability reduces as the number of components increases. Now it is even clear when you look at a graph of system reliability on the y-axis and versus the number of components on the x-axis. You would see the trend how the reliability goes down as the number of components increase. And I've seen in one of the practice questions, I actually quizzed on the relationship between number of components in a series arrangement compared to their reliability values. Okay. Okay, so pillar number 5. So this area focuses on the skills that is used to get the maintenance and reliability work done. These include planning and scheduling activities, quality assurance of the maintenance activities, stores, and inventory management. So here is a workflow for a CMMS that I put together. In 5.1, we as M&R professionals, we need to be able to identify, validate, and approve work. Okay, working with in the context of the organization. So on here, the work order process starts with a request. So you would have a request from the field. It may be a maintenance team member, a mechanic, or an electrician may put in a request. It may come from operations, or it may come from anybody, maybe supply chain. Anybody can put in a work request. And it may come in different forms. Let me grab my marker here and start pointing at stuff. So I was talking about the work request here. All right, so it may come in the form of a phone call. It may be verbal if you're like running a shop floor and you being the lead, technicians may approach you and give you information regarding a task that has to be done until you go into the system and put it in. It may be a field, a request coming through like a field mechanic, and they might have it on a scrap paper and bring it to you. And maybe you may have a standardized template that you would use depending on the organization you work with. Smaller organizations may not have all the structures in place, but whatever it is, in whatever format that the work request comes through, which as M&R professionals, we have to ensure that it goes through the CMMS, okay? And so that's where the notification gets created. And this is a term that I'm borrowing from SAP. So if you're using a different CMMS, your terminology might be different. But notification is the initial state of a work order request in SAP. Do you all use SAP, or there are other softwares that you guys use? Open question for discussion.
We use SAP.
We are using Maximo.
Maximo. Okay, so what's the first stage of Maximo? Is it called notification?
Yeah, handwritten, paper-written notifications.
Okay, okay,
Or email communication.
okay. So yeah, depending on the CMMS you use, the initial stage is the notification, and that's where you put in, you describe what is needed, and if you have more information in terms of estimated time for the work to be done and stuff like that, you may type it in the text box. It depends on what structure you have in place. So for some, all notifications must go through a certain individual for standardization. And for other organizations, anybody can put it in straight into the notification. So depending on your structure, if you have a template, then it even helps everybody to go through the same formalities, checklist, to make sure that the notifications that come through the system are consistent, right? So you must have a description, you must have a title, and you type it in caps or you type it in small letters. All depends on how much structure you put on the notification. Sometimes some organizations, they create so much notifications, so having a template may be a good idea to streamline everything that is coming through. Now, once the notification gets approved, it goes into the work order phase. And the work order phase, that's where you would have allocation of resources, technicians, parts, specialty services and stuff. And then once that is done, it goes through the planners, and they will make sure that they have identified all the permits and everything that goes. We will dive into it a little bit more. And then it goes through the scheduler. Depending on the context of your organization, the planner may be the same as the scheduler, or it may be separate rules. We talked about it earlier. Then once the job is scheduled, it goes through the maintenance execution team, and they will complete the work. And hopefully, once they complete the work, they will provide you with history, and they will have the backlog. They will manage the backlog as well, and then you can perform analysis based on the history that they provide. I've been in several sites where the requirement for the task completion was like, it was strict to the point that if you don't have certain information, you can't close the. So in SAP, you could actually make some fields mandatory, and they, at one point we made them mandatory, and they complained that they couldn't close work orders because they don't have the information. Like, for instance, the failure mode, you have to tick and describe what the failure mode is. But then if you put that as a criteria, that means that the planner or whoever is closing the work order has to have that information. And for the most part, the work order coming through doesn't have it described properly. So we end up getting false information. But in any way, if you have a structured process, it helps streamline the data that comes through the CMMS. And so in the future, when you're doing analysis, you have a much refined data to work with. Okay. So work order standardization. So establish a standard document for all incoming work requests. You must set minimum data points to be included, thereby enforcing business rules. So if you set the standard, you must enforce it. And that's where the leadership comes in. So if you have a substandard work order, it should be rejected. But in some organizations, they may let it pass. So if you let it pass, that means you accept a substandard notification, and therefore the organization will not grow to meet the expectation, right? Train end-to-end users for the requirement for work order approvals. So we have to make sure that once we set these standards, we ensure that the planners, the technicians, they are all trained in a way or manner in which they can put it in by the standard. If not, then you have to streamline it so that all the requests goes through one person. Maybe it's the planner, maybe it is the scheduler, maybe it is the maintenance supervisor, but at least you streamline all work order requests that is coming through the CMMS.